I want to dive into with you here. The reasoning behind and how you got to doing what you're doing today. We've covered some of that, and I'm sure that there's a lot more to go into there. But as a guy who grew up in San Diego, and as I said, I mean, I used to go to TJ when I was in high school for all of the reasons that we're somewhat ashamed of right now.
As many San Diegans have.
Yes.
Right?
And I've lived in southern Baja for a decade. I naturalized and became a citizen. All of those things I'm sharing right this minute, not to put any feathers in my own cap, but more to shame myself into saying Tijuana is a city that I literally know nothing about. And we got another 30 minutes, and we can break this up in a variety of different ways. But something tells me, for as much as I know about Baja, and I can tell you about some of the most remote places on that peninsula and the beautiful and wonderful people and everything else about it, but I'm pretty confident that you can tell me about a lot of things in Tijuana that I have no idea exist. And I will share this right now. The thing that captivated me when I first heard about what you were doing was the water park that's there that I had no idea existed. And the only thing that made me think about it here recently was back in February, I flew in a helicopter across the border down to San Felipe, and we flew right over the water park. And it reminded me, like, oh, yeah, I remember hearing about this guy that takes people to this water park.
Thanks to that helicopter ride, I'm here today. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So tell us about some of the trips that you do. And this, I mean, as much as it can be a sales pitch, and I'm all for that. I mean, I'm a capitalist, right? Let's get you some business. But more importantly, let's talk about some of the cool things that exist in Tijuana.
Yeah.
Whether you come with Turista Libre or not. I mean,
exactly. And that's how I always say that. I always say, like, whether you come with us or whether you just come, that's the important thing.
Sure.
That people come and they are coming with respect and with like the desire and heart to learn more about, what is really happening over there and how people live. That's one of the most fascinating aspects of this part of the world, is that we really do have this like clash of cultures living back to back. And on the U.S. side of the border, people have the option and the privilege to choose whether they want to live that or not. Where over on the other side of the border, it's not so much that.
Right, like, that's a good point. Very good
revolves around the fact that we live on the border, and everything that comes from it, the tourism, the industry, whatnot. So, the tours, we offer two different types of tours. We do public and private. Private tours are fun because you get to basically, you put together your itinerary and I'm your curator. So I like, okay, what are your interests? Like from today, like I've learned about you that you're a race car champion, which I have to say really quick that going back before I wanted to be bilingual, that was my like dream job or whatever. My first dream job was to be a race car driver. So I'm very, very, very happy to be sitting here with a race car champion. It's an honor. So whether like, okay, like what are you into? Okay, you're into cars. Okay. Food, right. So to put together a personalized, customized itinerary for you, like a boutique, it's more like boutique tourism.
Sure.
And that's really fun. It can be from 2 people up to 30. And it's really cool when we have private groups because sometimes it's like a group of friends who are celebrating like their 3rd year of med school. That was a brewery hop that we just recently did with like, all these med school students. Or it could be a family from Australia. It's, like from like 4 or 5-year-olds up to grandparents, and they're all crossing the border for the first time. It could be a bachelorette party. It could be a bachelor party. Those are really fun, both of them in their own ways. But then on the flip side, the public tours that we offer the themes change every weekend. And so it could
So are they always on the weekend?
The public tours, yes. Yeah,
okay.
Because most folks, like I said, like this all started mostly for folks living in Southern California.
Sure.
So for people who work, during the week, that's when the public tours on the weekends. And the themes rotate every weekend. So it could be, I call it like a third, a third gastronomic, whether it's like street eats or fine dining or craft cocktails or dive bars or things like that. Breweries, and then a third, I would say, like cultural, if you want to call it. That's a big word, I know, but like whether it's lucha libre or baseball games or soccer games, or a street art tour, which those are really cool because instead of just riding on the bus listening to me talk about different pieces of graffiti around the city, we actually have an artist on the bus with us, and he or she is basically taking us to their
cool, yeah.
And then a new thing that we're doing with those is instead of just like going back to the border when it's all over, we go back to their studio and do like a really short and fun but short and easy workshop. So everyone gets to take home a piece of art that they made, inspired by the style of the artist.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's like an experience that you're not going to get, on your own. Because these days a lot of people are like, I could just go do what you do on my own. I'm like, yes, you can, and that's cool. But I think seeing a tour more like I'm not needing this because I need it. I'm needing this because I want it as an investment because I'm going to have an added cultural experience on top of what I could do on my own.
How about the bullfights?
Bullfights are a touchy subject, and we've never done bullfights. We've done circus trips before.
That's an experience.
Those are an experience, and even when when I moved to Mexico, I was vegetarian, and so I'm very much understand animal rights and whatnot. Bullfights are a very touchy subject, and I would never need to take a group there because I think that people can get to those on their own, on them by themselves. I would rather take you to Lucha Libre.
Sure.
Let's watch humans toss each other around like bulls, or like animals, instead of watching actual animals. Yeah, and it was really difficult for me because I've been to 3 bullfights in my time in south of the border, and the first time I went was even before I moved across the border. I was still living in San Diego when I went, and Hemingway was one of my favorite writers, growing up and reading. I loved reading. Like The Sun Also Rises is one of my favorite books in high school, and everyone's like, I hate that book. It's like nothing happens in the book, and I'm like, that's why I love the book because it's about nothing, and it's just like the aesthetics of the scenery and what they're doing and going back across the border between France and Spain and whatnot. So I had that in my head when I went to my first bullfight, and I also thought about it as a journalist. Okay, this is not my culture. This is not my world. I'm not here to judge or have an opinion. I'm just here to observe. And even taking that into account, it was very difficult. Knowing what was going to happen to the animal and seeing it happen, it was very, very difficult to watch. And so over the years, I went a couple other times. And by the third time, which was, I think, maybe 3 or 4 years into my time in Tijuana, that's when I thought, now I have a right to judge this. Now I have been here long enough. Now I feel that I'm an active member of the world over here. I'm not just a tourist anymore. I live here. This is my home, and I'm not really into this. And I don't really care to share that with folks. But architecturally speaking, the bull ring in Tijuana is very important.
Oh yeah,
yes,
for sure.
It is the 3rd largest in the world, and the only one in the world that is on a coastline. And unfortunately, chances are very, very likely that it will soon be demolished, and I think they're putting a shopping mall or some sort of
man.
And that's the thing with border cities is we don't have a lot of historical buildings because in border cities, what would be considered a historical building is usually like a former casino or the Hayalai Palace, and so it's very, 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 very seldom that people will actually preserve something. When it's not making a profit anymore, they tear it down to put up something that will, and it's usually a place like a parking garage. Or in the case of the bull ring, which I've heard is going to be a shopping center.
So I will tell you, I've been to bullfights there, and I will also share that was, I believe, the official starting line for the very first Baja 1000, which was really just a bet between 2 guys on motorcycles. But they started from the bull ring there.
I had no idea.
But most importantly, I got to see Carlos Santana play at the bull ring at his first concert back in Tijuana after 35 or 40 years or something.
That's really cool.
And I mean, Carlos, I don't know if you know this, but Carlos is from Tijuana. Santana is from Tijuana.
Yeah, his guitar teacher, Javier Batis, is still very active, has his own guitar school.
Interesting.
Yeah, like local celebrity. Has his own street named after him. The street that he lives on is named after him. Yeah.
Well, I will say that at that and this was back, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s, but there was a point during that concert where I thought that bull ring wasn't going to continue to exist because of the movement that was happening within it from all of the people listening to their hero play the guitar.
Okay.
I mean, it was just this. There was a a harmonic and a vibration and a movement within that stadium or within that bull ring that I thought it was going to fall down.
And apparently, I don't know for sure. But I have heard that it's actually detachable, so you can take the bull ring can be taken apart. So maybe
without
what you
it
were
falling.
feeling, yeah, exactly. But the concert aspect there is really cool too. That it's been used for concerts. Actually, Los Caifanes. I don't know if you're aware of that band. They're a very, very popular band in Latin America. They're playing tonight, and that's a big, big, big thing. It's so much to the fact that, you know, a band like that is not only drawing people from Tijuana, they're also bringing people from all the way from LA or maybe even farther to come and see this band live. But Los Caifanes, the last major band that I saw there, I'm not a fan of this band at all, but it was the context, seeing this band at the Bull Ring, Megadeth.
Right.
That was really cool. I'm not a heavy metal fan, but it was a really cool experience to see Megadeth. And it was right before the elections in November in 2016. They did like a very short, I think, 5-city Mexico tour. And it was very much
interesting,
inspired by the upcoming election.
Interesting.
And the candidates.
Wow. So one of the things that I believe I've recognized over, I mean, literally 3 decades of in some capacity having straddling the border, let's say. 2000. So I was living in Los Cabos during the economic, whatever we want to call it, the last recession crash in Mexico. They were calling it the crisis. Mm-hmm. And I feel like one of the things that I witnessed, especially not living in Ensenada or Tijuana or any of the northern Baja areas. I was in southern Baja, but so the Cabo region, while it suffered from a tourism standpoint, it didn't just totally shut down, right? I believe that in Tijuana and Rosarito and Ensenada, the tourism that existed prior to that economic crisis more or less did shut off. And I feel like what I've gotten to witness in the time since then was kind of a rebirth of those areas where they kind of had to come up with stuff that mattered to them.
Exactly.
Right?
You said it
perfectly. And so now you have these authentic experiences that were not structured and catering towards the tourist. They were structured for themselves.
Right.
Whether it's the breweries or the good restaurants or the playhouses or whatever else, it was kind of a time period where there weren't tourists showing up on their doorfront, and they had to find other ways to support themselves. But then in the process, they also had to find ways to entertain and keep themselves occupied. Mm-hmm. And the result was this authentic experience, a local experience that now today the tourist is getting to partake in.
Exactly.
Am I accurate in perceiving this as a guy? I mean, because like I said, Cabo was kind of separated from it, you know, but you lived right in the middle of it when it happened. Right. Am I accurate in that?
You are, and it's really great to hear another person put that situation in their own words, because I'm always the one saying it. So it's nice to hear like the same story, but with different words.
Right.
Yeah, so you have it. Tijuana was always anything in Tijuana, whether it's a restaurant, a nightclub, a bull ring, whatever. This is first and foremost built for Americans and what Americans want. And so you have this kind of like, you know, kind of like a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox kind of like loses its...
Sure.
Right? Kind of like, what do Americans think Mexico is? Okay, well, we're going to build something like that, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a bar. And so it kind of goes this back and forth. Or a resort. Exactly, or a resort. And so there's this misconception. That's why we have donkeys painted like zebras on street corners. That's a perfect example. Like, 1914 is the oldest photo that they have still of tourists on top of a donkey on a street corner. No Mexican in their life would ever pay to have a photo taken of themselves on top of a donkey. And I don't think Americans would either, but they're thinking like, oh, this is what you do here. So, you know what I mean? This is how an economy was created. And in the 30s, one person started painting his donkey like a zebra, one, to make it stand out among the others, and two, because the black and white film that was being used at the time, the gray donkeys were not really showing up in the photos. So by painting it black and white, it really like popped, you know? And so I didn't know this, but apparently Adidas did the same with soccer balls. They used to be like
very
leather.
Interesting.
And so by making the games, the matches being televised were first on black and white TV. So having the black and white ball would make it easier to see as opposed to like this like leather, like brown leather, you know?
Right.
These days they're neon, right? So it's even easier to see on HDTV.
Sure.
But yeah, so this misconception, but if it weren't for these misconceptions,